You know, there is something about silence that most of us are afraid of. Yeah. Maybe we don't notice it, but we do almost everything we can to avoid it. Yeah. When we wake up, we immediately check our phones. When we are driving in a car, we listen to some music or podcast. Or when we are just standing in line, we listen to music. Yeah. And if it is like if we are scared to be in silence, and it is uncomfortable for us. And I've been wondering why it is so uncomfortable to be in silence. And maybe the silence has a way of showing us things that noise hides. Uh, I think one reason people avoid silence is that when the noise disappears, we meet ourselves. We notice our fears, our regrets, our dreams, our question, and the things we have been pushing away suddenly become impossible to ignore, and uh, that can be uncomfortable. But maybe that's exactly why solitude and silence matters, because we can't hear something we refuse to look at. I heard some parable, yeah, and it says when the water is constantly moving, it's hard to see your vision. You can't clearly see your vision. But when the water becomes still, everything becomes visible. And maybe our minds work that way too. Yeah. If the world is constantly moving, we rarely stop long enough to see what's actually happening inside us. But when we become still, we become seeing ourselves more honestly. Yeah, we can more understand ourselves when we become still. And one thing I like about the Bible and the Gospels is that Jesus repeatedly stepped away from the crowd. Yeah, and because he need the silence and the solitude. Yeah, think about it. There was always another man who needed to heal, or there was another sermon to preach, but he repeatedly kept going away from the crowd to spend time in silence and in the solitude and spend time with his father. And if he needed it that much, why do you think we don't? And also, the saints intentionally create space for silence because not because silence was magical, but because they were creating space for silence, and because they understood something, and it is that you can't hear every voice at once. If the world is constantly speaking, it's harder to hear God's voice. So they were not running from life. They were making space for what mattered most, for God. And how can we start? Uh, we don't need to disappear in the monastery or spend 40 days in the desert. Maybe it starts much smaller, yeah. Maybe just going for a walk without your headphones, or drive without music or podcast, or sit 10 minutes in silence. And at first it can be uncomfortable, but that is okay. not every uncomfortable thing is bad. So, I don't think just silence is the goal. God is. But silence creates space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to pray, space to not notice God's presence. And the world will constantly invite you into more distractions, into more scrolling. But maybe the deepest part of our life will never grow in the noise. They will grow in the silence. And this may be why Jesus kept stepping away from the crowd. And maybe we should too. Not forever, just long enough to notice and to hear the voice we have been missing all along.